So let's talk about high conflict people. People who avoid conflict are high conflict. The people who avoid conflict the most are the most high conflict people. And it's like we would think if you avoid conflict, you wouldn't experience a lot of conflict because you're avoiding it. But it's actually the exact opposite. People who avoid conflict have the most buildup of conflict. And conflict avoidance and this high conflict way of being shows up in the external world and the internal world. So I'm going to be talking about both in this video today. So, to resolve conflict is to expand. Increase our awareness, our understanding, and come to truth. To avoid conflict is to contract, yeah. Become small. Limit understanding. Believe things that aren't true. Lie. So when high conflict people experience conflict, they avoid that conflict perpetually by believing lies, lying to themselves, limiting understanding, and it comes out in their behavior. How this shows up in the internal world is what is known as fragmentation. When the inner self is fragmented, there's lots of conflicts. How one part of you behaves, what one part of you thinks, what another part of you thinks, it's all conflicting. To resolve those conflicts, we have to come to a higher or common truth, higher understanding of the self. So high conflict people have very fragmented inner worlds. And this is why when you interact with them, they have this style of relating that is very cycle of abuse-y. One second they love you, 1 second they hate you. 1 second they're nice to you, 1 second they're mad at you, and it's very high conflict. And what that is their own internal conflicts coming out towards you. People with very high conflict inner worlds will find it very hard to understand others. Because where there is supposed to be understanding comes whoa, it's fireworks. That scared me. Did you guys hear that? So as I was saying, where there should be understanding, there's avoidance. So high conflict people will be very judgmental. They will be very quick to make assumptions about you and your character. They will be very quick to jump to conclusions because the conclusions and the assumptions and the judgmental takes are very, I would say, easier for them than resolving their conflicts. It's not really easier. It's more of being high conflict person is a painful way to live. But yeah, so when people are very judgmental, they have a very hard time resolving conflicts within themselves. And that means coming to higher understanding. People who have very good judgment are very good at resolving conflict and coming to higher understanding. The more you learn about people in the world, the less emotionally reactive you are. Because emotional reactions are, and like dysregulation is kind of like a byproduct of avoiding conflict. For very high conflict people, oftentimes they have built their life avoiding some truth about themselves or others. And so it's easier for them to avoid conflict, because to resolve their conflict would mean they have to leave a job, feel their guilt, feel regret, change. And they can't change because if they change, there's consequences, right? High conflict people are always running away from consequences. But the issue with running away from consequences and running away from conflict is that you build up those consequences. Our conflicts, internal or external, are meant to expand us, to teach us lessons, understanding, truth, growth. And so when we avoid conflict perpetually, we stop learning our lessons. What was the point there? I had a point, but I lost it. When people avoid conflict, they have a lot of illusions in their consciousness. The conclusions that they jump to about people and others are illusions. And people become attached to these illusions as if they are reality. Then reality becomes kind of crazy and warped and subjective. It's like, whatever serves my illusions and helps me avoid conflict the most is what I'm going to believe is true. And then we get people who are not living in the truth, the true reality. So high conflict people not only will start a lot of conflict with you, it's like drama is started for no reason. When they start drama with you and conflict out of nowhere, when you've done nothing wrong, it's often because they're having trouble resolving a conflict. High conflict people will struggle with nuance, right? Like, you can be this one day and this another day. You can do this and you can think this and also think this. And having that skill of nuance is about resolving conflict, coming to higher truths and understandings. People who have very nuanced perspectives are really good at resolving those conflicts, those contradictions. Like, okay, here's this and here's this, but this element makes these not come together. So what's the higher truth? And then we have that nuanced, higher consciousness perspective to see the world through. And this is really like the key to, existing in neutrality. The ability to observe people, situations, and things in your life or even in your internal world with a sense of neutrality, non-attachment to how they should be. So yeah, this is understanding high conflict people. They're very fragmented. They have a lot of conflicts in their inner world. And so when abusive people or narcissistic people specifically want you to keep the peace, what that actually is they want you to avoid conflict. And keeping the peace with narcissistic people isn't peace. It's denied chaos. I'm thinking of like Five of Wands energy in the reverse. Keeping the peace to abusers is avoiding conflict and living in denied chaos. So, for example, when an abusive or hostile person is being abusive and hostile, to keep the peace is to avoid conflict with that person, the conflict that they're not for you maybe, and then we move into states of denial. They're not the problem, I am. That's an illusion. They didn't do something wrong, I did. That's an illusion. I caused their behavior. That's an illusion. If I fix myself, they'll stop. That's an illusion, and it's an avoidance of conflict. And high conflict people with other narcissistic traits will have this way of punishing your resolution of conflict. So you can think of narcissists as like in this karmic web of creation. I love spiders. They're my favorite bug. In this karmic web, where every behavior and trait that they exist in is designed to keep you trapped in their web with them. And so when you resolve conflict about abusers and narcissists, I'm not actually the problem. I'm not the cause of their behavior. I don't need to fix myself. They will have more, abusive ways of trying to get you back into your illusions. They will punish you for speaking the truth. They may escalate their behavior to an extreme level. They may start pathologizing you, telling you that you have some disorder that you're not seeing right, really ramping up the gaslighting. And that's just another reflection of their inability to resolve conflict. They don't think, maybe she's done inner work and she's actually learning something and seeing something that maybe I don't see. Maybe she's understanding something, or maybe she has a different perspective than me or he. They don't think like that. The conflict resolution is very comforting for their illusions. I don't agree, so they're wrong. I don't agree, so they're dangerous. I don't agree, so they're disordered. And they jump to these conclusions when people pathologize you. They're jumping to conclusions because they're refusing to see the nuance. And this is really common with narcissistic people because they don't know you. They don't ask questions. If you don't understand why someone says something, the rational way of behaving would be to ask a question. But to a narcissist in that web of traits, asking a question means they don't know something. And that threatens their control. So they resolve their conflict by jumping to conclusions about you, making assumptions about you. They don't know you. To ask a question is to resolve conflict. When we resolve conflict, we admit there is something we don't know. And thus we learn more and more and more. When we avoid conflict, we don't ask questions. We jump to conclusions. And high conflict people will also expect this of you. Not to ask questions. And that goes into a whole nother web. It's that big web. Status. Fake status. Not knowing is a threat to their status. Or you not knowing makes you low status. But that's an inversion. It's flipped. If we want to play status games on Earth, everybody can win. Everybody can succeed. And to increase your status is to expand. But narcissists flip it. To increase your status is to attack people who expand. It's all in the avoidance of conflict. And you'll notice with high conflict people that they often contradict themselves. That is their being contradicts themselves. And that's their mechanism of high conflict. When you treat them with consistency, you might notice that they react strangely. It's like they say something about themselves, and when you treat them as if what they said was true, they take offense to that. That's that like fragmentation. They're taking offense to something that they claimed wasn't offensive about themselves. You see that? There's different parts of the self. Fragmentation. And so before we end this video, treating people with consistency is actually a very good way to protect yourself from high conflict people. Because in a way, they'll show you who they are much faster. There's a way of kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt, the true benefit of the doubt. I'm not talking like make excuses for abusers. I mean, you don't have to declare someone as untrustworthy immediately. Part of like healthy discernment and pattern recognition is about kind of gathering evidence. And when you treat people with consistency, you're being authentic. You treat them as if they're authentic. And when they have a problem with being treated as if they're authentic, you see the conflict between you and them. They're not for you. If you're an authentic person, you want people in your life who are also authentic, so you treat them as if they're authentic. That's kind of giving them the healthy benefit of the doubt. And then they will kind of show you their conflicts and their contradictions. And then we don't have to exist in this kind of distorted self-trust. It's like you can have an intuitive sense of someone's energy and who they are. And you can recognize that sense. You can trust it. But you can also be open to finding more information. Okay, I recognize that something feels off about this person. Okay, now I see when I interact with this person, I see that something is off about this person. I see how their behavior makes me feel. I see how we aren't actually aligned with each other. Part of that narcissistic high conflict web is kind of forcing you to be like them. Controlling. And it's not true control. True control is about trust. When you trust yourself, you're able to take control of your life, who you have in your life. But they're controlling. And so with that, they want you to avoid conflict and have illusions. Because as long as you have illusions, you don't see that they aren't for you. They aren't aligned with you. They're not like you. And there's nothing wrong with them not being like you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when we're at different stages of growth, true growth, You want to be with people who can help us grow and who aren't going to kind of bring us down, drag us down. People can be very afraid of growth. And when high conflict people are afraid of growth, what they're afraid of is the truth. How you grow is by seeing the truth. Yeah, how you grow is by seeing the truth. People are afraid of the truth. But there's nothing to be afraid of. What's actually scarier is staying stagnant. What creates scary behaviors in people is refusing to grow, being high conflict. You know? So, yeah, your authenticity, your real self. It will show you who people are much faster, right? So you don't have to get like love bombed and like sucked into these relationships and have this betrayal. Your true authentic light of who you are kind of filters people out for you. But when we're in these high conflict states or states of illusion, our filter is kind of like everybody's dangerous. Everybody's for me and not for me. 1 second I like this person, 1 second I don't. 1 second I'm nice to this person, 1 second I'm hostile to this person. It's that high conflict nature. And it's remedied by our resolutions. Understanding. So, I love you.